Hello, everyone. My name is Rochelle Innocent, and I'm the founder and CEO of Project Purpose. Welcome to our channel. Our community is focused on fostering the intellectual and character development in children. We do this through our parent-child workshops that are focused on 4 themes: autonomy, self-efficacy, compassion, and self-concept, in order to cultivate grit, perseverance, and resilience in each child. And we are so thrilled to be offering one of the first of its kind digital, virtual, and continuous learning environments, enabling parents and children to connect from all around the world. At Project Purpose, our overarching mandate is to renew and rebuild family, community, and relationships. Our different social media platforms provide us with an opportunity to have discussions and to create space on all topics that relate to family, community, and relationships with ourselves as well as with others, with a primary focus on mental health and education. More precisely, the ways that the institutions of mental health and education play a role and have played a role in our societies at large. These discussions and debates provide us with an opportunity to think critically about what needs to change within these structures for us to live up to our bold slogan: support, protect, and empower each child through youth-focused development, better known as leadership in juvenescence. We recognize that in valuing our children's leadership potential, this also translates as recreating and co-creating environments, both socially and politically, that will enable our children to thrive. For those of you who are particularly keen on the topic, we also write thought pieces every other Sunday, and we actually just dropped the thought piece this past Sunday, so be sure to meander over to the website and check out our online content. Now, if it is the case that you are looking for a listening alternative, well, we're available on 12 different podcast platforms for your listening leisure, and we've provided you with access to the links in the description down below. Now, as is the convention, be sure to subscribe, hit that post notification bell so that you are aware of every time you post. And of course, if you like these conversations and you want to keep them going, like, comment, and share this segment. Let's get into it. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another segment here on Project Purpose. For those of you who are new, we cover topics that relate to mental health, mental wellness, and education. And today our topic of discussion is on education. And we're going to talk about the education behind a trauma-informed experience. And I think that I wanted to cover this topic in the form of education because I don't want to take a mental health lens to it or take a mental wellness lens to it. This is more so for the communities of people who have gone through trauma and some things to expect and some things that sometimes we take for granted. This is an important conversation worth having because a lot of us get thrown off by how much changes how quickly when someone has experienced a traumatic event. Now, a traumatic event is a visceral event, and by way of the impact on that person, it is an event regardless of the level of violence or the level of, intensity or the length of time, has completely changed that person's worldview. And someone can easily make the argument that if someone's worldview is different, they themselves are different, and this difference is fundamental. So sometimes our feeling is that, once this traumatic event passes or once more time goes by, they'll be back to normal. I think that it's really important that, first of all, we use the word normal with care, and I don't think that, anyone really fully fits within the description of normalcy. But I also want you to recognize that fundamental life experiences, like traumatic experiences, mean there really is, in some respects, no going back. That person is rewired differently because of that trauma. And to try to get them back to who they were because that person is what you are comfortable with or who you're familiar with, I think that that can be a really insensitive response and create a lot of distance between you and who this person is becoming post-traumatic event. So I wanted to have this conversation because I've had myself a few of my own traumatic events, and I've recognized now that some time has passed and I've had an opportunity to really introspect from a very cerebral lens, as opposed to just the emotional lens, I've had an ability to, I guess, calibrate the two. I recognize how fundamentally different I am. My priorities are different. The things I assign urgency to are different. The way that I see the world is different. The way that I plan around some of my trauma-informed experiences. Those trauma-informed experiences might be jarring to some people to think about that when I'm thinking about, well, how do I route my path from A to Z? For them, they don't think about it because they haven't had those experiences. So for them, it's like, oh, well, that's kind of extreme to think about something like that. But if you've gone through a traumatic experience where that was part of your story, it's not extreme anymore. It's just how you see the world now, because now you know that these things can happen to people like you. And I think that sometimes we discount the level of impact an experience can have on somebody because it hasn't yet happened to us. Or maybe it wouldn't happen to us just because of the way that we show up in the world, like we're very low probability that this is a situation that we will go through. But for people where it's happened to or it's almost happened to, those experiences are visceral enough that now it's changed the way they navigate in the world around them, and it's changed the way that they prioritize things in the world around them. And that is a fundamental shift that there's no going back from. And I can say that from my own personal experience. And what I've recognized is people who are empathic to it are generally the kind of people that you can bring along with you as you start to find a steady state with this change. But people who are resistant to it, who want you to bounce back, who want the version of you before that trauma-informed experience, who don't have the empathy to recognize that, hey, like, she's different. I need to make space for this difference despite how discombobulating it is for me. She's not the same person maybe that I got to know, but like fundamentally, she's still the same. It's just priorities, the way that we see the world around us is really very different. And I want to have a conversation about this because I think sometimes our inability to see how fundamentally someone can change in a matter of moments is what can cause rifts and what can cause dissolution of relationships as a byproduct of that, as a byproduct of the resistance that takes place when change is so abrupt and so sudden. And when that resistance is to someone's individuality, now informed by experiences that are non-shared, then that's going to create distance, right? So with resistance, there comes distance. And sometimes we're confused as to why this distance exists. And it's because we don't recognize, like, to what extent this experience that we've isolated as this one-time thing has just informed their entire worldview. And sometimes we think, well, okay, we'll get some support so that you can go back to how you see the world before, but why would someone want to? Why would I want to unlearn, unsee, unrecognize the things that I now see, that I now recognize are now part of my repertoire of tools and resources that I use to orient myself to ensure that that doesn't happen again, if I'm still fully functioning while doing it? And I think that might be the difference. And for some people, they can be completely paralyzed and completely incapable of resuming life as they typically would want to as a result of those traumatizing experiences. And I think that, of course, if that's the situation, if you're really having a hard time shaking off that experience or finding closure with that experience, then definitely get support for the closure and for the visceral effects of the experience. But I think the change that experience has created in you is a fundamental one that, that I personally respect in myself. So I think that the change that I've experienced within myself, the recognition of danger where I typically would have been oblivious, is something that I value as part of my trauma-informed experience. The fact that now I know that, even though I'm a woman and I'm strong and I'm powerful, I'm independent, I still need to recognize that there's a high degree of fragility that exists in just my femininity being recognized, right? Like, I can be strong and powerful in spaces where my femininity isn't someone's target. And that's just an example, right? Because at the end of the day, physically speaking, I have to recognize that there's advantages and disadvantages to my personal build, to the way that I show up, to, like if I'm in a social gathering or alone, like all of these things one thinks about when they're put in experience that shows them the reality of their ability to survive certain situations, right? And if you survived with the odds against you, then you're not going to allow yourself to be put in that position again. You're going to be much more careful. You're going to be much more conservative. And you need people to respect those areas where you take more care and consideration because you really value yourself. And I think that when you bounce back from the visceral effects of the trauma, when you're like, okay, this happened, this can happen, it's not okay, but I am okay. way, but now I'm going to use this information, the way that I orient, to do my best to ensure that this does not happen to me again. I think that that is something that one can only respect, right? One can only respect, and if you don't respect it, if you want them to be who they were before, then I think that's a loss that is unnecessary, but is probably inevitable, right? Because we are not who we once were prior to the traumatic experience. That experience shifts and changes the way we see the world around us, because now we're paying attention to things that we didn't pay attention to prior to that experience taking place. We are activated and responsive to signals in the environment that typically we were oblivious to because we didn't know what those signals meant. And I think that that is an informed traumatic experience. I think sometimes we think that trauma is this thing that we need to erase. And I don't believe that. I think trauma can be something that can be very impactful in the way that we show up moving forward and the strength that we provide to others moving forward when we can integrate that trauma and the lessons of those traumas in a healthy way. But in a healthy way still changes the way that you see me, that I've interacted with you, changes maybe even the conversations that I care to engage in. The things that I prioritized prior to the trauma might not be the same. And I think that it's important to, when you are surviving the throes or the after effects of a traumatic experience with someone, to give them time and space to find their equilibrium, and then recognize like that person, like once they found their footing again, is not going to be the person before the trauma, and give yourself permission to get to know this person again, right? Because it's when we hold on to a version of someone that has been shifted and changed by experience that we lose the person in front of us. And I think that it's so important to recognize that there are certain experiences you can't undo from people. You can't, there it away. You can't be like, well, that was then, this is now. No, it's part of my fabric. It's part of my narrative. It's part of my story. It's part of how I see the world now, regardless of the setting and situation that I'm in. And I think that it's important that we all develop a certain level of empathy and give people space to be who they are post-trauma without victimizing them further by being frustrated that they weren't who they once were. So I thought that this was important, and this is really for the people who are trying to support the people they once knew prior to the trauma by trying to ignore or trying to erase the person that they're seeing because they're like, well, this person's trauma informed. And again, I want to make sure that I demarcate between someone who's completely discombobulated, paralyzed by their trauma, unable to function as, like in the way that they typically would function prior to, like they're unable to go to work, they're unable to do the things that they typically would enjoy. That's not what I'm talking about. Obviously, you need additional support for that. But if you're seeing someone like they're back on their feet, they're doing the things that they enjoy, they're back to normal, but they're doing it differently, then respect that. I don't think that needs to be something that is criticized or something that is called out on when you haven't been through what they've been through. And we all cope in the best way that we can moving forward with our survival in mind. And our survival in mind is going to be different for each and every one of us, based on gender, based on build, based on the societies that we're in, the dangers inherent in those societies. I mean, there's so many different factors that play into why one person's experience might not be another person's experience. And I think that we all just need to give each other space to be who this new version of ourselves that has come out and is a byproduct of surviving that experience is, right? And I think that that's an important conversation really to just start having here online. And I think that this is me trying to do just that. So I think that's where I'm going to end. I'm going to end the conversation there. I could go deeper, but that might be another video on education, or it might be actually a video in mental health and mental wellness, because I think that when it comes to trauma-informed experience, we need to be more educated about how to support people post-traumatic experience. But I also feel that it's not just through a lens of mental health or mental wellness. We need to be educated about the shifts and changes to someone's worldview and how they can look the same, but they can be fundamentally different in a span of a snap of a finger, depending on the visceral or the intensity of this experience that they had. And we all need to just be cognizant of the power and the impact of our non-shared experiences. So with that said, that's it for today, but definitely not all. Now, before letting you go, I would be remiss if I didn't let you know that we will be going live at at least twice a month, every month for the foreseeable future on our Facebook page. So definitely be sure to join in. Now, these events are paid events. So if you do see yourself participating in our community on an ongoing basis, then I do suggest that you take a look at one of our package plans. Yes, so we do offer package plans over and above our live events, as well as access to webinars and workshops that largely focus on self-mastery. So definitely be sure to tune in. Now, if you are afraid of our pricing, please don't be. We've just incorporated a new payment solution, Afterpay, that gives you the opportunity to make payments in 4 installments over a period of 6 weeks, rendering all of our programming more accessible to you. And we look forward to seeing you soon. And hey, we're on the road to 1K, so definitely do your part, subscribe, follow us on all of our platforms, and be part of our hashtag Game Changer community and be part of the change you want to see. We'll talk to you soon.